Good morning, viewers. Welcome to the second part of our discussions that we had with Rakesh ji and Dr. Bhavani on September 15th. That day we discussed a lot about Bhagavad Gita, its relevance, Ganesh Chaturthi. Today we talk about the relevance in the Indian context. Where is this knowledge, this devotion, the values, the principles that were enshrined in Bhagavad Gita? Is it lost in India? Are we Indians following it? India today looks like as if it is a perpetual Mahabharata going on over there. Now 2019 elections are coming. I think everybody is fully aware of what's going on in India. So here is the part that I want to focus on today, because our program is designed to bring about awareness, talk about the truth as we know it. Remember about truth, there is one thing somebody said very, very appropriately, that when we talk about something being an absolute truth, we do not recognize that truth doesn't end or begin by itself. It is a constant experience. And if my truth ceases to be where it is, then my lack of knowledge or my ability to understand things declines. And then whatever little I know becomes my absolute truth. And that's the important part of recognizing and realizing the truth in that sense. So India is our homeland. This is our adopted land. We will be in constant dialogue in this program in understanding the implications of what we do, what happens in various parts of our life, political, social, technology, and economics. So today we will now talk about this very element, is that where does India stand with reference to what is coming in terms of political turmoil, economic growth, and all the story that is going on. So to begin that element, I will request Dr. Bhavani to share with us her impressions of where the values and principles in India are lost as of now, and we are not focusing on them, and what impact it has on the lives of people.
Well, thank you, Vibhuti, for having me on the show, and it's a privilege to be here and to address our viewers. India is now a seething microcosm. You could actually say something like that here. Everybody seems to have a different opinion about how things should happen, how things should be run, what should be done, what should not be done. I can tell you that in my family, my uncle was in the IAS, Indian Administrative Service, for the Karnataka cadre, and my aunt was in the Indian Administrative Service, Kerala cadre. She and her husband, they were both chief secretaries of Kerala state at different points in time. And the India, from when they were in the administrative services and now, it's almost like it's a different country. But applying, if you remember the last segment, we were talking a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita. So it's almost like there's a battlefield, like a Kurukshetra, which is now shaping up in 2019, So who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? We all, we think that because now Mr. Modi is there and he's doing a wonderful job, he's rolling back regulations, he is helping with trade and helping businesses set up in India, and to that extent, he's creating jobs, he's creating wealth for the nation, he is going to various countries and having them partner with India in various sectors. For example, the bullet train which is going to be taking place, that's all with the technology which we are partnering with Japan, and various countries. He's trying to have good relations with all our neighbors. Southeast Asia, every single country is very important to us, and we are right in the center of it, and we want to have good relations with everybody. So where is it going now? We hope very much that the 2019 election, that it will go in the right direction. We do want India to prosper. After all, although that is our Janma Bhumi, this is our Karma Bhumi.
Rakesh ji, Bhavani ji talked about Janma Bhumi, Karma Bhumi. What is your impression? Because we remain very attached to India. We will never, even though we are US citizens now, we are not going to give up our love and affection for India. So everything that happens in India affects us. everything that happens to NRIs affects India as well. So seeing the political situation since 2014 onwards, how would you rate the current government, and what do you think is the likely scenario 2019, even though elections are not announced, but we can begin to see the straw in the wind?
देखिए पहले तो thank you so much for having Bhavani ji and me. And Bhavani ji, I think I agree with what she said. She is very thorough and meticulous in giving you commentary about Modi ji. So I'm not going to duplicate what she already said, but let's look at a prime minister. Okay, he works 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, doesn't take a day off. Isn't not the karma yogi or the sthit pragya that Gita, Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2 we talk about? He is. And he has no relative who is driving a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes. He himself works like, as if there is nothing to leave behind. He works for the country, he works for the society. Now, in Pandav, they were pure. In Kaurav, they were sort of not so pure. Here we have Pandavas, Modi is, let's say, Yudhishthir, but rest of the army, I'm not 100% sure, because it will take time to transform. You just don't become yogi by becoming in connection with yogi or having a gar put on a yogi. You have to be from the bottom of your heart, feel for the people of India and do what is good for the country. Now, as for Karma Bhumi and Janma Bhumi, you can take an Indian out of India, but you cannot take India out of an Indian. That's the way I look at it.
Very true, very true. This is very important, because I remember when you mentioned about Mr. Modi that he's a karma yogi. I recall in 2014 when the elections started, and I was here on another program here, I had said the reason why Modi will succeed and win is because he's an authentic karma yogi.
Correct.
Because there is nothing else comes before him.
Right.
Because it's my duty. It's not the duty that is defined in a pompous manner. He has not defined that is my responsibility to turn India around. But he's defining his duty as if India deserves better than what it is. And that's where he has dedicated his life to. But important part here is that the opposition to him. The opposition to him is very interesting. It's not about the economy the way he has handled it. It's not about the social part of it, which is a problem. It is political. Bring him down one way or the other. How will that shape up? We do not know. At the moment, in my impression, if there is one man battling hundreds of opposition parties, for me, the dice is very clear. Here is the Pandav, there are the Kauravas. Now the question is, who is his Sarathi at this point in time? Because you can't be a fighter as well as a charioteer or Sarathi of yourself. Having said that, what would you talk about is what exactly has he done? What are the transformative elements that he has undertaken? Demonetization, much maligned. But there was a very important element of demonetization which nobody talks about, which incidentally, the IMF chief in India did talk about. When she was asked by a correspondent the impact of demonetization and how the IMF chief viewed India in the long run, and she made a very emphatic statement that all the steps are being taken are structural reforms.
Correct.
And demonetization was also part of a structural reform. Even though in the short run India will have to endure some pain, but in the long run IMF viewed India as a great prospect. The evidence is that now India has registered an 8.2% growth rate, which would not have been possible if structural changes were not done, if GST was not done, and everything the opposition is attacking him. So Bhavani, what I would like to hear from you is also the fact that India was, this is a very touchy social issue, and this is an important from the women's perspective, which bothers me a lot, that in India we have goddesses, women are goddesses, but incidents of rapes and women treatment is always an issue. And when one rape happens in India, it becomes a global phenomenon. And then India becomes an unsafe place for women. The entire media talks about it. But recently, we have come across incidents and report by New York Times and in the US church about the abuse by the papal authorities of the sex abuse. But the news remains underground. How do we address the perspective of rape and women abuse in India going forward? Because that women remain a very, very vocal constituency in India.
Well, talking about rapes per se, if you take the population of India and somebody reports a rape in a rural area in one city, you know, if you take a perspective and you transfer that to other countries, the percentage is extremely small. For example, we had Nirbhaya some years ago and so on. That was blown up. That was an incident which happened, and the newspapers and so on covered it very extensively. But what they didn't mention was that these things were happening in Brussels. You know, when we had a lot of refugees came across the border, and in Germany, I think Angela Merkel accepted them, and all the European countries had them resettled. However, there are a lot of rapes which happened there, New Year's Eve in particular.
Correct.
We heard about all those ugly incidents. However, you know, they're for some reason they are tucked on like page 5,
Correct.
you know, and at the bottom of a page, whereas things which happen in India are given like come up on the front page. So there is something about the to be said about that reporting. In India, women have always occupied a very special place. Very special place. In fact, goddesses are the ones who rule the roost there.
Right.
You know, any god when you talk about, it's the wife who is the one who handles the important portfolio. Whether when it's God Vishnu, it's Lakshmi who's got the wealth. Everybody prays to Lakshmi, you know, for abundant wealth. When you talk about Brahma, his wife is Saraswati, and when you're seeking knowledge, Saraswati is the Devi whom you do pranams to. And same thing with Shiva and Shakti. Shakti, the embodiment of power and information. So.
That was a very interesting explanation, and we will take a short break. When we come back, we will talk about the exact situation, how media and how social media treats India, Indians and Indian affairs, and what we need to do to take care of that matter. Stay with us. We'll be back in a short while. Welcome back. In this particular segment, what we want to talk about and touch upon is taking the thread from what Dr. Bhavani Srinivasan said earlier, that how the media covers an event and a news. That bothers me as well, because as a person who had the responsibility to market India in this part of the world, you always found India had a very poor visibility, whether it's television, now social media or print media. My first encounter in 1991 April, when I came to this country, was a New York Times article. I don't remember the author, but he talked about a man from Rajasthan on page 3 or 5 who was 78 years of age. He had 13 wives and 99 grandchildren and whatever else.
Yes.
I checked in and I asked, is this the only news worth covering from India? And they said, yeah, this is the news that sells from India. That's the point which is very important to figure out, that rape gets globalized in the Western media, but we don't cover that as well. So there is a particular perception in the media, the way we cover ourselves and we give coverage to the events. We are a media company. So in my programs going forward, you will hear very blunt statements. I'm not afraid, but I want to talk about the truth, the implication of something that we do or we don't. That's important to understand. And that will be the focus of our program going forward in weeks to come. So the point which I'm trying to raise is, Rakeshji, please do share your thought process on this. Does India get positive coverage, negative coverage, neutral coverage, or who gives a damn?
So this is a very profound topic, and I tell you, as a country, as a human being, the one quality or one characteristic that you need is confidence. Arjun lost his confidence. He had all the skills but lost the will, and Krishna had to teach him or bring that confidence back to him through Bhagavad Gita. Now look at India. For most of the 1,000 years we have been slaves, we have been ruled by foreigners. They have destroyed our cultures, they have destroyed our books, they have destroyed our heritage, and what they write about in the history books is their narrative, not our story. So when you look at the caste system, it is done in a bad way. When you talk about the dowry, it's done in a bad way, but the reality is different. And we can talk about it at length, but this is not the time. So when you have a foreigner defining your narrative, or even a foreigner defining who you are, then obviously there is a bias in their own lens through which they are seeing. India must get its own storytelling. And I think Modi, coming back to politics part, is doing that. That's why when he goes to abroad, when he goes to foreign countries and talk about India, there is a renewed confidence in Indian across the world. And I think that's the biggest asset that you can start with. Without confidence, skills don't work, leadership don't work, and then you have a systematic failure. And to bring a point about media, when a Swami or somebody from Hindu Dharma is caught doing something, and there are thousands and thousands of Swamis, it's all in the front page. But like you said, when there is a sex abuse scandal at church, is either not covered or buried. I find it unfair.
And that's very true, because we get very adverse publicity despite being 1.2 billion population around the world. Somewhere along the line, if I take the responsibility part of it, who is responsible for that? And I take the cue from you, Rakeshji, from your statement, that for thousands of years we were ruled. Thousands of years our narrative was changed. It is in a couple of television programs I have myself said that India has to rewrite its narrative, has to reposition its storytelling. And if others write the narrative for us, then that's how people will know about us. So the question here is very important. To what extent we let things drift or happen in a manner that it impacted us adversely. So Muhammad Ghori came, he attacked us, the British came, they ruled us. What happened to the united India, the knowledge India had within all its Puranas and Granths? What happened to that? Why were we not united? And that's something which bothers me. And I want to do a research on that. But the question here is, we still are allowing that to happen. We still are overcritical of ourselves. We are still more subservient to what others tell us. So, Bhavani, what would you like to say about that part? The extent of responsibility that we own to us, to ourselves, that ye hua hai, ab nahi hone denge. Because mistakes happen, but if you allow the mistakes to repeat itself, then history repeats itself.
Well, we have to start from the grassroots level in order to, achieve what you are saying. And first of all, we have to have pride in ourselves. When we were having all these various invaders, and especially when we had colonialism from the Brits, one of the fundamental items that they tried to do was take away the self-esteem of Indians. And even now, Indians, they really don't, they have to think, and portray themselves in a favorable light. And that is our generation. I'm glad that the younger generation is thinking differently. But as far as portraying ourselves, I'm glad to say there's an organization called Hindu American Foundation, and textbooks in classes were being portrayed in a completely unfavorable light, especially Hinduism. They were saying monkey god and elephant god instead of saying Hanuman, instead of saying Ganesha. So, at that point, HAF stepped in and said, could you please rewrite these textbooks so that they are factual, and not derogatory. And at that point, they did get a pro bono counsel, and they did have to file a lawsuit with the school. With the California School Board, with the result that California and Hawaii, where the textbooks are written, came to the discussion table, because they won. HAF won that particular lawsuit. They came to the table and they discussed with HAF how to rewrite the textbooks, how to put a proper, how to write things in a factual manner. Because the average American, when he thinks of Hinduism, he thinks caste, curry and cows. That's what he thinks about. And that could not be further from the truth. So Hinduism is so much more than that, as we all know. And coming to the political angle, 2014, when we were having such a huge election and the rest of the world was glued to the TV and glued to all the news media, US, there was nothing on PBS, nothing on any of the channels about the Indian election. There was one person, John Oliver, who said, you know, he's a Britisher himself, and he said 2014 election, nobody's covering it, so I'm going to cover it. And he said, okay, so here's the person who is he's young and he's handsome, but and he's from Congress. Do they want him? No, they want this person, you know. And then he showed a picture of Modi. That's the person whom, you know, is the favorite. And I want to say something about Mr. Modi. At this point, he has given us back our pride, which is so important. We are proud of being of Indian origin. We are proud to be Hindu. We are proud of who we are, what we have become.
No, I mean, I totally agree with you. Mr. Modi has changed the narrative of India. That's very important to know. And people, even though you do not like him, but I think the world must acknowledge, and we all must acknowledge, that he has indeed changed the perception of India. And living in America, we know perception is more than sweat that the hard work that you put in. Perception matters. And that narrative had to change. Think about it like this. It was Mr. Modi who restated the ownership on yoga as a yoga is an Indian thing. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, people were talking about Om is a religious thing, and people were giving various dimensions of yoga. Everybody was thinking about they own the yoga as an expert in that domain. The point which is very important to know is that Mr. Modi has indeed changed the perception of India, and I totally agree that in his perception, the way he has presented India, there is a respect to India. His detractors, what is it about us Indians that we become extremely self-critical of ourselves? Why are people not seeing the good and make a distinction between good and evil? And that's another issue that I wanted to check with you, Rakeshji, is that why is it that certain Indians, I believe there was a recent congregation of Hindus, and they were left Hindus, left-winger, the Marxist, socialists, they were so anti-Modi, so anti-India, that it kind of leaves you flabbergasted.
Well, the two things that come to my mind is that there was a gentleman who climbed Mount Everest. So they asked him, why did you climb it? He said, because it's there. What is happening is that because India has been beaten, and because of our concept of non-violence and not being aggressive, even though our dharma talk about Shastra and Shastra, we focus more on Shastra and not on the Shastra. So that's one issue in my mind. Second issue, if you look at the 17th century, our GDP was 23% of the world GDP. Today it's less than 2%. It's growing, obviously. But we are 1/6 of the population and hardly any place in the world. So what is happening is that when a place is rich and you can steal from it and not get caught, you go away with it. Britishers have stolen so much money out of India that for last 70 years they have survived on that loot, and now they are realizing what is happening in London. London has been taken over, New York has taken over London as the financial capital of the world. You can see the impact of it now. Second thing, the largest Holocaust was in India. Nobody talks about it. 70 million Hindus were killed by famine and starvation, much worse than, Jewish Holocaust obviously is a very terrible thing and I shouldn't be comparing, but the reality is that if somebody is shot, they are out of their misery as opposed to dying slow death over a period of time. It's a shame in both ways, but that has happened in India.
Right.
But the world doesn't know about it. There are two history authors who wrote an encyclopedia of world history book, and they wrote on it the Holocaust in India that the world has forgotten.
I totally am aware of that, and this is something very important, is that we have to, it's very sad it angers you virtually to hear that millions and millions of people died for famine because to serve the British Empire, or the slaughtering of Hindus and Hindu women happened at the hand of Mughal rulers. But we are still not united. If India had united at that point in time, none of this would have probably happened. But in a karmic cycle, maybe this was necessary for us to bring back the strength together. Maybe that's what is happening. What is important here for us to know is that moment has now come. In the Kal Chakra of thing, India is right now in the center of focus of the whole world. Just like United States is the engine of economic growth, India can show the path to world peace. If the only thing the world did was to accept one tenet of Hindu philosophy is acceptance, Replace the word tolerance, religious tolerance, with religious acceptance. And that's the key. We will talk about it as we go more and more deeper into the program. Thank you very much for being with us today. I wanted to share with you that this is the first program we have done in 2 parts, but we will do every Saturday, 11 o'clock, 1 hour program. Once a month, I believe it will be half hour. So please put up with us, encourage us, and wish us good well. Thank you very much for being with us today. See you next Saturday with another very important topic which is directly relevant for all of us. Thank you. Have a good day.